Well, hello, everyone. Well, today I am honored to interview famous Marc Boney. He is famous in my eyes. I have read just about all of his books, and boy, does he have a lot of books. But he is so intelligent, and he teaches yoga, Ayurveda, and even TM. Back in the 70s, you were a TM teacher, Transcendental Meditation. That's quite amazing. And like me, you have a degree in psychology. Actually, you are a counseling psychologist. You have a master's there. That's pretty amazing because our work is so much about counseling and helping people. And this is a necessary component, I think, of astrologers. There's so much to talk about with you and your teacher, K.N. Rao. Cannot believe you just got back from seeing him in India. And I mean, what an honor. What an honor it is for me to be with you right now, Marc. So you are coming to our conference, and I'm thrilled. And I want everyone to know the purpose for me having this conference is basically to bring everyone together in person, because this is where the true learning really happens, where the magic happens, when we're in person together. And so everyone should know by now we're having a conference June 2nd through the 5th in Dallas, Texas, called Future of Astrology. And Marc is going to be presenting on something that is so interesting to me. It's called Elegant Simplicity, but it's about the Jiminy Karakas. So I want you to tell people a little bit more about yourself, because you're such a fascinating person. You teach all over the world, and you have so much knowledge and information. Everyone just wants to be around you to get that. And the other thing is I want you to talk a little bit about your class and what you're going to present here in Dallas. So go ahead, Marc. Tell us.
Well, thanks, Joni. That was quite an introduction. I should hire you as my PR agent, but I appreciate you having me here, both in this interview and then at the conference. I have a great passion for astrology, as you do, and just love the subject and love teaching it. So, as you mentioned, I feel incredibly blessed in life to have had a pretty close teaching-student relationship with K.N. Rao. I was able to spend a lot of time with him, both in the U.S. and India. And he seemed to like me and want to be able to teach me. So I consider that a great blessing in my life. Now, he was personally responsible to some degree for reviving the Jiminy aspect of Jyotish. There's two primary methods of chart interpretation and prediction in Jyotish. There's the Patry method, which is what most people are familiar with. And then there's the method based on the Jiminy Sutras. And it had fallen kind of in a great amount of disuse all over the world, really. And in India, only in an area called Andhra Pradesh was it still active. He got into the system, was fascinated by it, and as I said, kind of created something of a revival of it. He wrote a book called Predicting with Jimini's Charadasha, which I'm sure you know, which became sort of the landmark book. I think I read that book 20 years in a row, once a year, and got more out of it every time. But because this was something of a speciality of his, it also became a speciality of mine, and something that for the last 30 years I've really been deeply involved in. I've written now 3 books on the subject, the latest one being Predicting with Jimini's Karakas. As you well know, in the Jiminy system, each planet takes on a special status based on its degrees in the chart. So it's going to be unique to each chart, right? And that, along with Jimini's sign-based dashas, not planetary dashas, but sign-based dashas, it can be used to predict. And this is what I've just recently wrote a book on. It's now actually available on Amazon.com. It's called Predicting with Jimini's Karakas. Charaka means changing karakas, right? Charaka is the change from chart to chart based on degrees. So, and you're well aware of this. I'm just explaining this to people. But the title of the talk that I'm going to give at the conference, I titled it Elegant Simplicity, because what I really came to appreciate about the Jiminy system is the way in which events can come out in just a very simple, straightforward way without a lot of analysis and even without the use of divisional charts. Now, not always so, but sometimes to just a very startling degree. and in which times you can make a prediction, maybe within minutes, maybe even seconds, which is, I'm going to discuss a case study, a particular interesting one of mine where that happened. So you've got 7 karakas. K and Rao used what's called a 7 karaka scheme. There are people out there in the world of Jyotish that use an 8 karaka scheme, but he insisted on 7 karakas. And the thing to understand about these is that they each relate to a person in your life, starting with the Atma karaka, which represents yourself as an individual. But they also, the 7 of them also carry all the significations of the first 7 houses, right? So, for example, the 4th house, of course, relates to property and vehicles. Well, you can make predictions about a person acquiring properties and vehicles based on what's called the Matrikaraka, or the MK, which is the 4th planet with the 4th highest degrees. But of course, Matri means mother. And so it also gives you some insight and clues and feedback about one's experience with mother in life. So this is what my presentation is about. And I'm going to focus on, in my books and articles, I've given all kinds of examples of this using the charts of celebrity and famous people. But I am really going to focus on actual predictions that I made with this. And I'm going to start here by sharing screen. And you can, now I'm displaying the chart in both the North and Indian South styles, right? It's actually easier to do Jomini with the South Indian style, but I know most people in the world look at the North Indian style charts, right?
I'm a South Indian girl.
Oh, are you? Are
Yeah.
you? Well,
Yeah.
then we're kindred spirits. I learned
Yeah.
from K and Rao, and he always used the South Indian style chart.
Always. Yeah.
And so that's what I look at, but I know that most of the world looks at North Indian style charts. So looking at this chart, you'll see in the abbreviations for planets like Jupiter there, JP for Jupiter, right next to it is a abbreviation for the Karaka that it is. So AK stands for Atma Karaka, which is the planet with the highest degrees, all right? But I want to focus in this chart on the sun, which is the Amatya Karaka. Amatya means actually, it literally means someone who is a part of a king's court, like an advisor to the king. And what K and Rao discovered, in other words, an important person. And what K and Rao discovered is that this karaka can actually be used to predict when a person themselves would become more important. In other words, it could be used to predict career rise. And the simple principle is that when you, now remember in the Jomini system, the periods, the dashas, are signs, not planets, right? I'm talking to the audience here. I know you know this. But so the simple principle is that when you run a sign period containing the AMK, then this can be a period where a person could, as I said, become a more significant individual, which means they could have a career rise, they could get a position, their status could increase, right? Now, this is going to be especially so when they are connected with other Jaimini karakas that form Jaimini Raja yogas. One of the most significant Raja yogas is when there's a connection between the AK, planet with the highest degrees, and the AMK, planet with the second highest degrees, which, in the Jaimini system, we use what's called Rashi Drishti, or sign aspects. So I'm letting everyone know that all the planets in dual Rashis, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, would all aspect each other. So in other words, you can see here that the sun, as the AMK, is in a Rashi Drishti, a sign aspect with a strong Jupiter in its own sign as the AK. This forms a very significant, one of the most significant Jaimini Raja yogas, all right? So what I'm showing you here is the chart of my best friend from college days. And every year we meet up down in Florida around Christmas time. We have dinner together just to catch up. And back in 2013, when I was doing this, and I, keep an eye on his chart, and I've given him input before astrologically, I noticed back in 2013 he was going to move into his Virgo period. Now, he's had a very successful career as a clinical psychologist and also as a corporate consultant, right? But he explained to me that one of his clients, who was this billion-dollar corporation, the vice president of human resources, was retiring, and he was looking for his replacement, and he invited my friend to apply, even though that wasn't really his background. And this really intrigued me. And so, I saw him moving into this period where it clearly was going to show a significant elevation for him. And I asked him when the decision was going to be made, and he said it probably wouldn't be made for a little while because they had to do a national search and all this sort of thing. But they would probably make the decision by October of 2015. Okay. So now this really intrigued me because in the Jiminy system, we use both periods and subperiods as if they're a lagna, and we see what happens to the planets from there. So he's running this Virgo period, containing his AMK, and then involved in the significant Raja Yoga. He comes to the subperiod of Sagittarius. If we use Sagittarius as it's the first house, then that 10th house becomes so strong, right? That is, that yoga from Sagittarius becomes in the 10th house Virgo from there. Did I think people can follow that? I hope so.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I saw the short of it is I saw Virgo as Sagittarius as being a period that very clearly showed a potential for a great elevation in his career life. I could see this in the Gemini system literally in a matter of seconds. Okay. And I told him, well, Dan, if you went, and he didn't really think he'd be able to get the position. As I said, that really wasn't his background. I said, well, Dan, if you get the position, you owe me dinner next year. And he did, in fact, get the position, and he did, in fact, buy me dinner the following year. So this is what I mean by elegant simplicity. It was just a simple matter of seeing that he was running the sign containing the AMK, and it had some additionally good qualifications. It was influenced by two benefics, Jupiter in its own sign, Mercury in its exaltation sign, and they were forming significant Raja yogas, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a very simple matter to predict that this period, which, you know, is a good long period, and he's now been in that position. The period runs 12 years. It's the longest any sign period can be. He's been in that position now for 6 years. And I could identify a sub-period when he would experience that career rise. Now, the reason I was able to do this is because I've seen things like this before. Well, first of all, this was a principle that K. and Rao taught. But, you know, as you know well, Joni, when you work on charts, this is when you learn. In fact, you know, I tell my students, Jyotish will teach you Jyotish. Work on charts and you'll see how things come out, right? Exactly. As long as you're working on accurate charts. So I am going to pull up the chart of the famous Hollywood movie star Mel Gibson to further what I'm talking about here. Now again, so the AMK, what I'm explaining is that it can be used to predict a person's career rise. And even under certain circumstances, give a person a period that would give them fame. So let's see, Mel Gibson here. Here's his chart. Now, we can focus in on his sun, which, as you can see, is also is in Sagittarius, right? His AMK. Mm-hmm. His sun is also the AMK, is what I'm saying, and it's in Sagittarius. Now, it doesn't. The only association it has is with the moon over there in another sign, but you can see it actually forms a different kind of relationship. You'll note that the sun and Jupiter are in an exchange. Right? Sun's in Jupiter sign, Jupiter's in the sun sign, so there's an exchange. So that's like a very strong connection between the sun and Jupiter. So that's an additional good qualification for this AMK. Also, as I think you're well aware, the third house, third lord in Jyotish rules the performing arts, rules acting, right? And so the Gemini equivalent of that is the planet with the third highest degrees, the Bhratrikaraka, abbreviated here by the BK. Okay. So what you'll find, remember the AMK is a career indicator, and what you'll find is that in the many people who are in the performing arts, and even athletes who are performing, there's a connection between the BK, like unto the third lord, and this AMK, which is a career indicator. And this is what we see in the chart of Mel Gibson, and is one of the indications from the Gemini point of view that he was someone who was a professional performer, right? But now we come to timing. He first became, and this is where the elegant simplicity comes into play. He first became a big international star when he appeared in this movie, The Year of Living Dangerously. I think it was, well, I forget exactly when it was. It was in 1984. And so this was in his Pisces period. First of all, it's the 10th house of his horoscope. But remember, the technique in using the sign-based system is that we use now Pisces as a lagna, use it as if it's the first house, and we see where the karakas fall from there. Well, if we use Pisces as the first house, karaka sun falls in the 10th. In the previous chart, I was showing you a sign containing the AMK. Now I'm showing a chart from where the AMK falls 10th when he runs Pisces period.
I see.
And because of its additional good qualifications, which, it's a little more complicated to explain, but the exchange with Jupiter, this is when he first became a big international star.
Okay.
So now fast forward, when he runs his Sagittarius period, which was starting at age 34, now he's running the sign containing the AMK, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, elegant simplicity. This could easily be identified as a period where he would be especially successful. And it was during this time that he directed, produced, and starred in the movie Braveheart, which was the absolute high point of his career. Now come to sub-periods. Back in Pisces, he became a big international star in the sub-period of Sagittarius. So in other words, back when he ran Pisces, the AMK sun was falling 10th.
Yeah.
The sub-period was Sagittarius. So Pisces Sagittarius is when he starred in this movie that made him a big international star. Now come to Sagittarius, the sub-period was Pisces when the movie Braveheart came out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see how these two periods, either containing the AMK or from where the AMK is falling 10th, is timing perfectly these high points in his professional career?
Wow. That's pretty simple, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you have to know the Jiminy system and all that sort of thing. But, once you know the Jiminy system, it couldn't be more simple.
Right. Now I want to know where my Amacha Karaka is, my AM.
That's what everybody goes looking for, right? After they see this principle. And, well, I will, K.N. Rao astonished people when he came to the U.S., as you know, back in the mid-90s. You were there at all the conferences. He astonished people by his ability to be able to see events in their past life, besides then giving them predictions, right?
Interesting.
And people didn't really know how he was getting it because they couldn't see. All they knew was Vimshotri, all they knew was Parashari, and they couldn't really know how he was getting it. What they didn't know is that he wasn't using Parashari and the Vimshotri at all. He was using the Jiminy system and doing what I'm showing you here. So my first consultation with him, let me just get my chart up here quickly as I explain this. He asked me, okay, hold on.
Okay, so are you going to show us this at the conference about the past life information?
Well, not past life, past events in a person's life.
Okay.
Past events in a person. I misspoke, so past events. But he asked me, he said, round about 1990, well, actually this was early, well, around about 1992, what big job did you get? And I kind of smiled and said, wow, that's pretty amazing. It was during this time that I was made the vice president of the San Diego office of the international consulting firm here, okay? And I didn't understand what he was looking at or how he was getting that. What he was getting at is that he saw that during that time, I just entered my Aries period, containing who? AMK.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's more to it there. There's natural benefics on both sides that are strong in their own signs, so that it helps additionally qualify this AMK. It's also involved in a mutual Rashi Drishti with the AK, so that's a Jaimini Raja Yoga. So, but really, it couldn't be more simple that when I moved into my Aries period containing the AMK, that this could be a period that could give me a good career rise.
Wow.
That's simple.
Yeah.
Now, since I got my own chart up here, the planet with the fourth highest degrees, referred to as the Matrikaraka, indicated by the MK here, right? So if you look at my chart, you'll see that the MK is my Venus. And it's got some good qualifications. It's in its own sign, and it's in a good house, the 9th house, right? Well, when I moved to Southern California back in 1990, I always wanted to live right by the ocean. And as you can imagine, the property there is hugely expensive, right?
Mhm.
And I really didn't wonder if I'd ever be in a position to actually buy something, right? But then after I moved into my Taurus period, this would have been in 2004. And it's always risky to kind of make predictions or on your own chart because there's no way you can be objective, right?
Right.
But I saw this period and said, I'm moving into this Taurus period. It contains this Venus strong in its own sign, who happens to be the MK. Now, knowing the Gemini system, I knew that the MK could be used to predict things like purchase of vehicles, because it's a fourth house signification, purchase of property, because
Yeah.
that's another fourth house indication, right?
Right.
So what happened, I ended up getting this substantial position that paid really, really well. It was the highest paid position I'd gotten in the corporate world. And all of a sudden, I started getting a position to potentially buy property. But
Mhm.
first, because I had a long commute, I convinced myself, Joni, that I needed a better automobile to make that long commute. So I bought a luxury automobile. I bought a BMW. So
Mhm.
this Taurus period containing my MK gave me a nice vehicle. But
Mhm.
then later, it did put me in position to buy the home that you see me in now, that I feel very blessed to be in. I'm about half a mile from the ocean here in a community called Cardiff by the Sea. Right? So I felt very, very blessed about this. But now let me give you an idea how things can come out. Because you could see this was a 12-year period. To tell someone, well, you're going to acquire a property in 12 years is not very precise prediction, right? They want to know more about, well, can you narrow the time frame here, right?
Exactly.
So there are sub periods that would have been eligible to do this, and one would be Sagittarius because why? It's the fourth house.
Mhm.
And if you use Sagittarius as a login, the fourth house from there becomes strong. It contains Jupiter
Yeah.
in its own sign. It was exactly in Taurus Sagittarius that I got the property.
Okay.
That's simplicity.
Yeah.
But of course, the Karaka I've probably used more than that. What people ask questions about the most are relationships, right?
Mhm.
And very often the question is, I'm not in a relationship. When might a relationship come into my life? When might I marry? Right?
Mhm.
And so the way we do this in the Gemini system, as I'll be presenting at the conference, is the DK, the planet with the fewest degrees, which is like unto the seventh Lord.
Mhm.
DK stands for Darakaraka, which means indicator of spouse.
Mhm.
Okay. And so the Darakaraka can be used to predict marriage. And the simplest way that that can happen is when a person runs the period of a sign containing their Darakaraka, either in the birth chart or in Navamsha. All right. So I've made any number of predictions that have been blessed to have them count accurately using this approach to identifying such periods. And I'm going to show you one such example of that. This is the chart of a wonderful woman who used to be the publicist for Deepak Chopra. I used to be associated with Deepak and taught at his center in La Jolla, California, for a period of time.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the people around him came to me to get consultations. And here it is. So she was a woman who had some wonderful relationships, but now she'd entered her mid-40s and was really interested in getting married, right? So you can see in 1996, looking down at the dasha, and the dasha I'm using what's called Chara dasha. It's one of the main predictive tools in the Gemini system, right? And you can see that she entered her Aries period, okay? So immediately I saw that this period was very eligible for giving marriage. Why? Well, if you put your finger or you mentally think of Aries as a lagna, either in the birth chart or Navamsha, you see that her Darakaraka is this exalted Saturn. You see that?
Mhm.
And so one of the ways this can come out is you can be running the sign containing the DK, or you could be running a sign from where the DK falls in the seventh house. This was the case here, right?
Right.
Because she was running a period where the Darakaraka, because it's Vargotama, falls seventh from Aries, both in the birth chart and in the Navamsha. And I saw that the first sub-period coming up would be the one of Taurus. And of course, that's the seventh house of her birth chart, right?
Okay.
So I said, well, this period looks very fruitful for bringing a relationship in your life, potentially leading to marriage. That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Now the way you can increase predictive accuracy is when you can see how both the Parashari system with its planetary periods and the Jaimini system with its sign periods, when they are showing the same thing.
So let me ask you something. So can you use the Jaimini Karakas for in terms of the Vimshotri Dasha system as well?
You mean when you're running the major period of a planetary period, who's the Darakaraka person married then? That's what you're asking me.
Exactly.
I don't.
Okay.
There were some people around Rao who were kind of researching that, but I don't mix systems. That's my own personal view. I don't mix systems. What I do is I use them together.
Okay.
So,
Got it.
and let me show you in this case. So I was seeing that at the same time she was asking me this question, she was running her Saturn Mercury period and sub-period. Okay. So there was overlap between the period that I was identified in the Jaimini system that very simply and very clearly and very straightforwardly showed the potential for marriage, while at the same time in the Vimshotri system, she's running Mercury Saturn. Well, Mercury in the birth chart aspects the seventh house.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, in the Vamsha, you can see that Saturn rules the seventh and Mercury's in the seventh.
Yes.
The analogy I like to use is that, if you think of a Las Vegas slot machine, when you hit the jackpot, it's when all the symbols come up the same, right?
I like that. It's true.
I talk about bananas. You got one banana, well, if another banana comes up, and sometimes I'll even use 3, 4 dashas to see the confluence, how a period is all showing and pointing things in the same direction. And then transits come into play too, but dashas are primary and they have to be first. So a lot of almost all the predictions I've made of marriage, and there have been many, is where I'm coordinating what Vimshotri Dasha is showing in its planetary periods, and then what the Jaimini system is showing, although usually I'm looking at the Jaimini system first, because very often these things come out, again, in a simple and straightforward sort of way. You're familiar with George Clooney, of course, right?
Of course.
His chart is a great one to use in terms of demonstrating sort of elegant simplicity here. So I'm pulling up his chart, and you may be aware that he met this woman, Amal Clooney. They married, they had twins, and they purchased a mansion together in the island in the Thames in London. So in other words, he got married, he got children, and he got property in a foreign country. Okay.
Okay.
So which house rules foreign countries?
The 12th.
The 12th, right. So now I'm going to pull up his chart.
Okay.
All right. So now focus in on Capricorn.
Okay.
You can see it contains 3 planets, one of whom is the DK, Darakaraka, indicator of spouse, one of which is the MK, like unto the fourth house, fourth lord of property, and of course Jupiter is the natural Karaka of children. When we interpret Jaimini sign periods, we don't just think of the planets in terms of their special Karaka status, we also think of their natural significations, right? So you can see that here's this, eternal bachelor, but at age 50, he moves into his Capricorn major period, and he marries in this period a sign containing his DK, but also marries a foreigner, right? Now you also see Rahu in the 7th house of his birth chart, showing the potential for that as well. And in fact, prior to this, he had relationships with other, women from foreign countries. But he didn't just marry; he had 2 children. It's a sign containing Jupiter, the natural Karaka. Do you see? Yeah. Jupiter, Capricorn also, and then they purchased this property. which they purchased a home together. As I said, it's a mansion. It's a historical mansion. It's in an island in the Thames River in London. So what I'm saying is, by seeing his Capricorn period, you could predict there was going to be developments in his relationship life because it contains the DK. You could see there was going to be developments in his, in terms of his property acquisition because of the MK.
Mhm.
And because Jupiter's there, you could also see it potentially as being a period that could give children. That is elegant simplicity.
Well, he had twins too. He does have Gemini on the 5th house, but
Yes,
hey,
he does.
that would mean everybody that Aquarius
Right,
rising would have
right.
twins, and
But
that's
there,
impossible.
sure, there's more to it than that, right? Of course, there's
Yeah,
always more to
of
it.
course.
So now, of course, now I've been talking about favorable events, career rise. Well, one more. I When Prince Harry married this woman, Meghan Markle, okay, I had both of their charts. And since they were already in their 30s, I presume they wanted to have children fairly soon thereafter. So I started looking at their charts in that regard and made online a prediction about this, indicating that they would have a child mid-year 2019. And I'm pulling up Prince Harry's chart here. And again, this just illustrates the idea so clearly of how sometimes events show up in the Gemini system in a very simple, straightforward way. Where's his chart? Here it is. Okay. So focus in on the planet in Libra. It's an exalted Saturn, who is the PK. PK stands for Putra Karaka. Putra means son, but really what it means then is that this is an indicator of children, and it can be used to predict childbirth, which I have used it to predict childbirth many times. And I did in this case. You can see that back in, he married again in 2018. And then the last sub period in this was going to be Libra, which would run from October of 2018 to 9/2019. It clearly indicated the potential for a child. Just looking at one sign, one factor, and the timing. How simple could you get?
Yeah, I love it.
So, right. And it turned out to be true. They had Archie, their son, in June of 2019. Now, of course, I'm looking at her chart. I'm looking at what's going on in the Parashari system, and I'm looking at certain time frames in terms of some periods, and so that's where it gets a bit more complicated. But really, just seeing that Libra showed so much potential for giving him children during this time, based on it containing the PK, that's the elegant, simplistic side of it.
It's almost like a backup. You get a, where you confirm that you're seeing it in Parashara, and then you look at that and then you go, oh, yes, this is it. You nailed it,
Kay and Rao called it a cross check.
Yes, a cross check. It's what we're doing.
And this is how because when I share completely at my talk, the predictive parameters for these events, they make a lot of sign periods eligible. So you have to figure out which ones are merely eligible and which ones are going to actually bring the event. And the way you do that is through this idea of cross-checking between the two systems.
I get it. Now, there's something that you haven't mentioned that I'm always unclear of, and it's the Ganaktakaraka, the GK, because
that's where I'm going next.
Oh, good. Great. Love it.
Now, as we well know, life isn't always not just a sweet song.
Yeah.
People get ill, they get ill, seriously ill, and they pass away. So the troublemaker in the Gemini system is the GK.
Yes.
The planet with the 6th highest degrees. Therefore, it carries all the significations of the 6th house, one of which is illness and disease. So now I'm pulling up the chart of. I didn't know this person personally. They were. I knew their friend who asked me to give input about the chart, and I will tell you that I didn't like what I saw, and I'll tell you why in a moment.
So is it always going to be detrimental?
No. You'll see in the book I just wrote, each chapter is about predictions that can be made with each karaka.
Okay.
And I'm showing both favorable predictions that can be made with them and also unfavorable. So
Okay, let me ask you something. Are all your books available on Amazon? I want everybody to know.
every one of them available both in print copy and also e-format.
Good. I want everyone to know about
both.
this. I've read just about all of your books, and I think they're fabulous. But go ahead.
Well, thank you. I try to be clear and explain people and teach people these techniques.
Go ahead.
So now, when I was shown this chart, I immediately saw what period they were running in Charadasha, this sign-based period, and I saw that it was Aries. It contains, as you can see, Venus, who is in this system the GK planet with the 6th highest degrees. It's also the 6th lord of the birth chart. So, in other words, it has a double qualification to give some events related to the 6th house, including illness. Now, that alone would not be that bad, but in the Jimny system, we use these sign aspects. Movable rashis, like Aries, are going to be aspected by any planets in fixed rashis, except for the one next to them. So, in other words, Venus, as the GK, gets the influence, the Rashi Drishti, the sign aspect of all those planets in Aquarius, which contain the 2 worst malefics, right? And now the DK, because it's like unto the 7th house, 7th lord, can also play the role of Maraka. The irony is that the DK can get you married, it can also kill you. So you have this GK with these afflictions, and this did not look good to me. So the reason they asked me about the chart, because this person had started exhibiting some symptoms. So I said they need to go get very thoroughly examined and checked out because there could be something problematic here. And it turns out it was discovered they had stage 4 cancer, and they passed away in this period. Now, that doesn't now want to scare anybody. It doesn't mean if you're running the sign containing the GK, it means you're going to get deathly ill and die. It doesn't.
Right.
I could show you the charts of somebody like Serena Williams, for example, who GK, of course, represents everything related to the 6th house, which is also competition and the ability to overcome your opponents. So when you have the GK configured in a certain way, as I did show in my book, in the charts of some very world-class athletes, it can contribute to them being someone who is being very successful in competitions.
Okay.
So just like every house, Joni, it can have its good sides, it has its bad sides. Every karaka, like I explained, the DK can get you married, but it also plays the role of Maraka in this system, right? The killer, right?
Okay.
So, I don't want to go too far on here, but I'm trying to just, and this is what I'd be showing at the conference, and this is what I show in the book, is the way in which events come out in the Jimny system and the way sometimes they can come out in a very simple, sort of elegant way. Let me show you, and it's particularly true if then the karaka has some additional qualifications, right? Let me pull up this chart. And when I pull the chart up, focus in on the Cancer period, right? So you can see the karaka that it contains is the MK. Again, we have to think events related to mother, because that's the main thing it symbolizes, but also every indication of the 4th house, which again would be both property and vehicles, right? And of course, it's in a good condition here. It's in its own sign. And the best thing that happens to it is that it gets the Rashi Drishti, the sign aspect from Venus. Because it's a movable Rashi and a fixed Rashi, there's a mutual sign aspect between them. And this combination is given in the Jimny Sutras as being one for having expensive luxury vehicles.
Really?
Besides being, K. and Rao always described it as both a Jimny Raja Yoga and a Dan Yoga, which I found to be extremely true and have predicted on that basis. But just focusing on its signification here, as the MK, it clearly shows a period. So when this person sure showed me their chart, they'd been running this Cancer period for a while. I said, did you acquire any particularly good luxury vehicles during this time? And she said, well, yes, I bought both two Mercedes, one an SUV and one a sedan during this period. And then I said, it seems like you're involved in property issues during this time. She says, yes, I came from a very landowning family and my father died and I'm the one who manages all the properties now. She's a lawyer. Right? But there's more to the story here. It's with K2. That would be considered something of an affliction. And there's the Rashi Drishti also of Saturn. Saturn is in a fixed sign. Cancer is a movable sign. This creates a Rashi Drishti. So, there's some things going on with mother of an unfavorable nature. Right? So, again, this is, but by just seeing a strong MK here, particularly with this aspect of Venus, it was predictable that this period was going to give certain results. And you could see it in an instant if you knew the Gemini system.
That's right. I see it. I get it. I love this.
Okay, well,
fantastic.
You can see why I fell in love with the system.
Yeah, because I know when you were talking about Kay and Rao giving you all those predictions about your past, and of course, the first thing an astrologer does, how did he do it?
Exactly. And none of us could figure out how he was doing it until the summer of 1994 when he came and taught the first class on Gemini that I was present in San Rafael at the Embassy Suites Hotel, as I recall. This was back in July of 1994.
Yeah.
But anyway, I could go on and on here, obviously, but and I have to emphasize that I'm picking examples where it is elegantly simple how the event came out. It's not always that simple, but sometimes it just is.
Yeah.
That's what I like about the Gemini system.
Okay.
And maybe if there's anything else or questions you have and so forth, we can conclude here. We don't want to keep people's attention too long here.
Yeah. Yeah, but these were fabulous examples because they were clear cut, simple. And I know everyone's going to get a lot out of this talk because, as I said before, we learn through being in person. We really just pick up more. And
and I hope people get inspired if they haven't yet explored the Gemini system to do so. The way in which maybe I'll conclude by just talking about my first encounter with K and Rao.
okay.
So he was the chief guest, and you may recall this. You might have been there, Joni. I don't remember. But
Why don't you take it off this shared screen so we can see you?
Oh, sure. So this is November 1994. It's the second International Symposium on Vedic Astrology that David Frawley had organized. K and Rao is the chief guest. So he gives his keynote speech. And then at the end, he says, well, I'll be up in my hotel room if anybody wants to come, visit with me. This is the face-to-face you talked about, right? And the advantage of being face-to-face. So I was a little late getting up there. I look in the room, it's completely full. The only spot available is like right in front of him. He's sitting around and like everybody's gathered around him. So I climb over some people. They weren't happy with me about that. I sit down right in front of him. And he looks at me and says, do you know the horoscope? And I thought he wanted me to hand him his horoscope. So I start to pull out my horoscope and he says, no, just dictate. So I started giving him the positions of my planets and the signs and the ascendant and all this sort of thing.
Wow.
And, and just within seconds, Joni, he starts reeling off a number of statements about my life, such as, you're the only son of your parents, but you have 4 or 5 sisters. I was the only son. I have 5 sisters.
Wow.
Instead, you had a very good classical education, studied literature. Now, this is where the Gemini system comes in. He was able to calculate who my Amakaraka was by me giving him the degrees of planets. So he was able to know a special lagna used in Gemini called the Karakamsha lagna, right? And he was able to see in my chart that it was Scorpio. And from Scorpio, using Scorpio as a lagna, my 5th house becomes Pisces and it has that strong Jupiter. And he said, so he had good classical education, studied literature. he could see and make this prediction or say about something that was true about my past by seeing that I had a strong Jupiter in the fifth house from Karakamsha Lagna, wherein the Jaimini Sutra says exactly you'll have a good classical education and study literature.
Yeah. And
And,
write books too.
and write books. And it says that's a combination for authorship.
That's the fifth house is the house of authorship. Wow.
That's the combination for authorship. So, he was seeing this, and he was seeing it not on a piece of paper. He was just seeing it in his mind, right?
That's
This was
incredible.
this was K. N. Rao.
Yeah.
And then I was astonished. I said, I've never seen anyone do this with astrology. I'm going to study with this man. And then the next day, he's doing a day-long webinar or seminar, seminar on timing the birth of children. He had just written that book, Planets and Children. These were techniques that his mother had taught him. His mother specialized in just two questions: when a young girl would marry and when she would have children. So he writes this book. He teaches this seminar. I learn these techniques. I come back to San Diego. Word gets out that I'd learned this. I get a call from some woman who had been having trouble getting pregnant. She had done the in vitro process once. It had failed. She said, "Can you tell me if I'll be able to have a child and when?" And I said, I'm a beginner at this. I'll give it a try. Long story short, I predicted it was, maybe June. I predicted, maybe it was September. I predicted she would have a child in June of the following year based on what he had taught. And it was my first successful prediction. Maybe beginner's luck, but it was just using K. N. Rao's techniques. Everything he taught me, which is what I teach in my books, are things that I found that worked.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Including these, what I've been showing you here in terms of how to predict with Jaimini's Karakas. So that's what I had to share today.
Well, you know what I love about you, Mark? The willingness to share your knowledge with everyone, because in the past there was astrologers that didn't want to give their secrets away.
Right.
But you and I feel the same way. We have to teach the next generation coming up so that they can take this to another level beyond all of us. So
no question. But this was K. N. Rao too. I mean,
yeah.
he and his teachers at the school, they got paid nothing.
Yeah.
The school made money, the Bharatiya Vidya Pravan, but it was all service. They were just all sharing their knowledge, and he set that example, and I try to follow that example, as you do as well. So
yeah, we all should do that.
I look forward to seeing you at the conference, hanging out with you, and the students. And so then it's just about a month and a half away, right? So looking forward to that.
Me too. Me too. Well, thank you so much for this interview. I have learned a lot, and I'm never going to look at a chart without doing the Jaimini Karakas because, I know they work. I've worked with them a lot.
They do. Let me just say one more thing here. Hold on.
Good.
I just want to say that the book I wrote is not a beginner's book. It presumes some basic knowledge of the Jaimini system, right? So if people want some basic knowledge of the Jaimini system, there's other good books on this, but my book is this book, The Essentials of Jaimini, that goes through all the fundamentals of the predictive principles of the Jaimini system. And once you've absorbed this book, you're then, in a position to read more advanced books. That's what I would say.
Okay, good. Thanks for that word of advice, because I'm sure a lot of people might be just lost. So thank you very much for that. But I know you're a great teacher. You explain everything so clearly. And like I said, I have learned so much from reading all of your books, and I'm not kidding you. I have them all on my Kindle just because every time I go on a long trip, I absorb them all.
I'm glad you find them of value, Joni.
They're very valuable. But thank you for all the work you do, and thank you so much for coming to this conference. And I know all of you out there will love meeting Mark. He is just full of wisdom and knowledge, and we'll all have this gathering.
And you can all come up to be with me in my hotel room, and we'll have a good discussion.
Oh my God. We'll have to make sure you have a big room. Okay, Mark.
Take care.
Again, it's been a joy and a pleasure. So we'll see everyone in Dallas. Thank you.
Bye for now.